guys, welcome back to Beyond the Cowl. You've got Sammy, and today we are going to be doing a border unit for Unit 4, week number 3. It is the Windows border and the border patrol cones. So we're going to do the Windows border first. Now this is a nice, no frills, geometric looking border. It's great for more masculine projects. It's nice and simple. So I've just attached my yarn into any stitch. Now you can either do a single crochet into the same stitch and a chain 1 to do a stacked single crochet. You can do a chain 2, a stacked double crochet rather. You can do a chain 2 or you can do a standing double crochet. Either way, we want a double crochet alternative as our first stitch. I'm going to pop a double crochet into the stitch next to it, and then we're going to repeat this pattern all the way across. We're going to chain 1, skip the next stitch, and then double crochet into the second, and the third. And chain 1, skip 1, double crochet into the second, and double crochet into the third. So we're just going to repeat that all the way to the corner, which I am just going to quickly work up so I can show you how to work the corners for the windows stitch, windows border. Skipping 1, double crochet into the next 2, and that gets us to our corner. So I've got a corner chain space I'm going to be working into. I've finished with my skipping 1. I'm going to work 2 double crochet into that corner chain space. Chain 2 and another 2 double crochet, and then we're going to repeat the same pattern down the next side. So we'll start by chaining 1, skipping the first stitch and popping a double crochet into the next 2. Now a couple of things to bear in mind here. If you're working into a traditional granny square, apply 2 stitches, either worked or skip stitches, in each space between the clusters. So I'd work 2 double crochet between each cluster and use the cluster as the skip stitch. So you'd be working in 1 stitch either side of the cluster. If there's an uneven number of stitches, instead of skipping 2 stitches, which would leave a bigger gap, just work 1 into the last stitch and do your corner as you normally would. Corner spaces should get 2 stitches. The join is considered a stitch standard when you're working across if it's something that's got joined squares. So it'll either get 2 skipped or 2 double crochet depending where you're up to in your pattern. Finish off this round. I'll meet you back here for round 2. I'm going to be changing to a different colour yarn to get the full effect of this beautiful pattern. See you soon. Okay guys, back. The first row is finished. and we're ready to do the second row to finish off this lovely border. So I've attached my different coloured yarn with a single crochet in the back loop of a double crochet. So I'm just going to work a single crochet in the back loop only of the next double crochet. Now for our skip stitch, we're going to do a front post treble crochet around the stitch that we skipped in our original work. So working over the top of the chain that we've done as the first part of the first part of the border, down into the actual piece of work that we are joining onto. Then I'm going to back loop single crochet into the next 2 double crochet from our border round on our chain where we've skipped a stitch, front post treble crochet around the stitch in our original piece of work. And then back loop single crochet into the next 2 doubles. So you can see how strikingly effective that is for some nice simple stitches. Now we're at the corner. Just before we start the corner, some of these skip stitches on some of your projects may actually be chain spaces and not a stitch in the work. So it could be a chain between clusters or something. If it is, just work a treble crochet into the space that you skipped instead of doing a front post treble crochet. You'll still get that gorgeous window effect. Just obviously there's no stitch for you to work into there, so work over that chain space. Now for the corners on this work, we're going to double crochet into the chain space of round 1. We're going to treble crochet into the chain space of the square, and then we're going to double crochet. This can be a little tricky because you're working over a chain space and then into it again, working a double crochet into that chain space. And that's how we do our corners. So nice and simple. Coming out of the corner, we're into back loop single crochet for 2, and then now you see I mentioned the chain space and one's popped up, so I'm going to do a treble crochet, but because there's not a stitch to work around, I'm just going to work it around that chain space. And then back loop single crochet as we did on the previous side. This next chain space has a stitch for me to work in, so I front post treble crochet. And that is our gorgeous windows border. So it's nice, simple, quite a boxy masculine stitch, despite the contrast on my square choice here with a nice popcorn flower. But you can see how visually appealing it is and nice and simple to work up. Alright, I'll let you guys finish that one off. I'm going to put a picture of this finished up for a few minutes, and I'm going to meet you back here to do our second border option for this week, which is the Border Patrol Cones border. See you all in a minute. Alright guys, ready to explore our second border stitch for the week. This is the Border Patrol Cones. So I have attached my yarn in the top right chain space. If that's a stitch, that's fine. Attach in the very corner stitch. Now the Border Patrol Cones border is a wide decorative border with an interesting design. You might see the cones or you might see the trees. It's made with a variety of stitches, so it's lots of fun to do. you will need to do some calculations to figure out how to space it along the edge of your project. Directions and examples are given to help with that. We can talk through them a little bit. We'll just get the base round done first. So, attaching the yarn in the top right corner space or stitch, we're going to do a beginning cluster. So it starts with our slip stitch, we chain 2, which is the first double crochet, and then we do 2 more double crochet to the second last step. So 1, got an extra loop there. How did I, oh, I see. 1, just to the second last step for the second, then we're going to yarn over and pull through all 3 loops on our hook, and that is a beginning cluster. Move that over, chain 3, and then we're going to do a 3 double crochet cluster in the same chain space. So yarning over, working 3 partial double crochets, so we're only doing the first pull through for each one. Once we've done the 3, we yarn over and we pull through all 4 loops on our hook to finish the cluster. Okay, now we're going to repeat this down the side. So chaining 2, skipping 2, we're going to double crochet across, we're going to stop doing double crochet 2 stitches from the next corner. So just popping a double crochet in each stitch, stopping 2 stitches before the corner so we can chain 2 and skip those last 2 to work our corner clusters. I'm going to finish this out and meet you at the next corner. Okay, I'm back. I've stopped 2 stitches before my corner. I'm going to chain 2 to skip those 2 stitches and then work a double crochet cluster into the corner chain space. So 1, 2, 3, yarning over and pulling through the 4 loops, chain 3, and work our second cluster into that corner chain space. So we're going to have our base round, double crochet with 2 skip stitches at each end, and our cluster, chain 3 cluster in each corner. I'll let you guys finish that base round. I'll meet you back here so we can look at the rest of this beautiful pattern. Okay, our base round is finished. Now it's time to do the maths. So just a quick explanation. Each side of the pattern is 15 stitches wide. So it will be repeated a certain number of times plus a corner assembly of 2 skip stitches with chain 2 and a cluster, chain 3, a cluster, 2 skip stitches and a chain 2. So that's a total of 7 stitches, plus the number of stitches at each end before and after the corners. So in order to calculate the end number of stitches, you'll need to count the number of stitches you have along the side of your project. So I highly recommend printing off this pattern, even if you don't want to read the pattern. There is, you can see here, top, bottom and sides, if you're making a rectangular blanket, where you can easily work out your calculations, because if you're anything like me speaking them to you through the video is a bit like gibberish, but I'm going to do it anyway. So calculating, start with the number of stitches on one side of your project. subtract 7 stitches, so you're removing the corner stitches, and then divide the number left by 15. So my project is 22 stitches because it's just one square. So when I take away 7, I've got 15 left. So I've got enough to do one repeat of the pattern. So the whole number gives you the number of times, the answer to when you divide by 15, gives you the repeat number, the number of times that you're going to repeat the pattern. Now you're going to multiply the repeat number by 15, subtract that result from answer number 2, which is when you've divided your counted your stitches and removed 7. Divide that by 2, and this gives you the number of end stitches to add on each side of the corner assembly. So for example, you have 120 stitches before making the base round. If you use the first and last stitch as the corner stitches, you'll have 120 stitches along the top after the base round. 120 stitches minus 7 is 113 stitches. 113 divided by 15 is 7.533. Your repeat number is 7. So 7 times 15 is 105. And then 113, which was the number when we removed 7 at the start, minus 105 equals 8. 8 divided by 2 equals 4. So you need to add 4 extra stitches in to keep the pattern consistent. Really, I'm sure plenty of you are much smarter than me, but I highly recommend printing it off. If you can't print it off, just pull the pattern up and write the formula out the way the girls have written it with these handy little boxes, so that you have got a clear calculation right in front of you for when you start working the second round of this pattern. Okay, now to work the second round of this pattern, I'm going to slip stitch over into my chain 3 space and do a beginning cluster. So chaining 2, working 2 partial double crochets, just doing the first step and keeping those loops on my hook, finishing by pulling through all 3, chaining 2, 3, chaining 3, and then popping a cluster stitch into the same chain space. 1, 2, 3. Chain 2, skipping my cluster and popping 2 double crochet into the chain space. Now your number, the next bit is you're going to double crochet into the next however many stitches you figured out were your end stitches for the top and bottom. So however many you need to skip or include. So we're going to, for me it's none. 2 rather, 2. So I'm going to skip 2, and then I'm going to double crochet across the row until I have 2 left. Okay, sorry, it's not 2. I'm not skipping any stitches. So I skip the cluster, I put 2 double crochet into the chain space, and I am going to double crochet in the next 4 stitches. My apologies for the confusion there, but you're going to be double crocheting into the next however many stitches you have calculated as your number of end stitches from top to bottom. So you're going to repeat this across until there are whatever your number of end stitches for the top and bottom are left. So I've done mine. I'm going to chain 1. I'm going to skip 3 stitches, 1, 2, 3. In the 4th stitch, I'm going to work a double crochet cluster. A chain 2. And another double crochet cluster into the same stitch. 1, 2, 3. Chain 1. I'm going to skip 3. 1, 2, 3. And then I'm going to double crochet into the next however many your number of end stitches for the top and bottom of your project worked out to be. Which was 4 stitches. And I've got 2 double crochet into the chain 2 space. And then we are skipping our cluster and working our corner, which is a cluster, chain 3 cluster. So we're going to repeat that process, but instead of using the top and bottom end stitches number, we're going to use the one that we've calculated for the sides. And that's assuming your pattern, your project is a rectangle and not a square. If you have the exact same stitch count, you're working on the exact same measurements. My project is a square, so I'm working on the same measurements. So cluster, chain 3, and another 3 double crochet cluster in the corner. That's done, and we continue on. So we're skipping our cluster stitch and working 2 double crochet into the chain 2 space. My apologies. After that second corner cluster, we chain 2. Chain 2. Then we work 2 double crochet into the chain 2 space. Then we double crochet into the next however many stitches we calculated as our end stitches for the side of the project. For me, that's 4. And we repeat again. So chaining 1, skipping 3, 1, 2, 3, popping a double crochet cluster, a chain 2 and another double crochet cluster into the center, and continuing the repeat of our pattern. So I'll let you guys finish out the second round and I'll meet you back here for round 3. Okay, got that second round done. You can see that the clusters are pushing out. They are supposed to look like that. It is a beautiful large decorative edge. Round 3, we're going to slip stitch to our corner chain space and do a beginning cluster. Chain 3. And double crochet, a 3 double crochet cluster. Picked up an extra loop there. Chain 2. Okay, now I'm going to skip the cluster, pop 2 double crochet into the chain space, and I'm going to double crochet into the next number of stitches plus 1. So remembering, if you're working on the top or the side of your project, what number you're going to be needing to follow if they're not the same. So I'm going to do 4, 2, 3, 4, plus 1 stitch. Sorry, I'd misplaced my stitches there. So 4 plus 1. Okay, then we're going to repeat that across until there are the same number of stitches left. First, we're going to chain 1. I'm going to skip the next double crochet, the chain space and the cluster, so I'm working into the chain 2 space from our previous round. I'm doing a cluster, 3 double crochet cluster into that chain 2 space from the previous round, chain 2, and another 3 double crochet cluster into the same chain 2 space. And we chain 1, we skip the cluster, the chain space, and a double crochet, and double crochet into the next however many stitches for your end stitches on the top or bottom. Plus 1 extra stitch. I'm going to take us up to our chain space, 2 double crochet into the chain space, 1, 2, chain 2, and we're back to a corner. So you can see how our pattern is extending out for each row. Alright, I'll let you guys continue with that repeat. I'll meet you back here for round 4. Okay, we're getting bigger very quickly with this gorgeous stitch. Now on to round 4. Once again, slip stitching into that corner chain space to do a beginning cluster. Chain 3 and then a double crochet, 3 double crochet cluster into that corner chain space, 2, 3, chaining 2, skipping the cluster from the previous round and popping 2 double crochet into the chain space, and going to double crochet into the next however many your number of end stitches is, plus 2. Now I'm only doing 1 repeat because I'm working on a smaller square. If you're working on a full-size project, you're going to be doing multiple repeats. So here where I say repeat across until there are your number of end stitches left, you might be doing, say, 4 a cluster, 4 a cluster, 4, etc. Okay, so I'll be double crocheting my 4 plus 2 this time. 3, 4 plus 2. So those additional stitches only happen on the ends. If you're doing the repeat through the center between top and bottom or side clusters, it'll just be your standard number. Okay, chaining 1, skipping the last double crochet, the space and the cluster to do a 3 double crochet cluster into the chain space. We'll be doing the cluster, a chain 2 and another cluster. Now remembering, I only have the 1 repeat. If you have additional coming out after this last cluster, you'll just be working, excuse me, into your number of stitches and then all the way to the corner, repeating as we have on the previous rounds. So I'll be chaining 1, skipping the cluster, the chain space and the first double crochet, and then working my number of stitches. If you have more than 1 repeat in your pattern, this is where you would be doing your next one. I don't, I'm working into the corner, so I need to work my extra 2 stitches. Two into the chain space, chain 2 and into the corner with the clusters. So you can see how that stitch is progressing and looking beautiful. We've got 3 rounds left to go. I'll see you back here for round 5.